Hey everyone, welcome back. So you drew a hunt or you purchased a tag, however you did it, you are getting ready to go hunting. Congratulations. That's obviously one of the most important steps, is being able to acquire a tag. And these days, depending on which state you're in, that is not so easy. I know I was a bit overwhelmed and intimidated when I drew my first tag, and it was like, what do I do now? So today, we're gonna talk about how to plan your first hunt. First, let's discuss my 3 must-know tips for planning your first hunt. Number 1, you must know your game species, your animal. What are you hunting? You wanna find out everything you can about that animal. When do they eat? Where do they eat? When do they drink? Where are they drinking? When do they bed? These are some questions you wanna ask yourself and answer before your hunt if you can. Some other things to think about is, what are their migration patterns, specifically during your hunt? So if you draw an October mule deer hunt, what is their migration patterns? Are they rutting during that time? In New Mexico, typically not. Typically, mule deer are gonna be rutting more in the winter months like December and January, right? That's important because the deer are gonna behave differently during their rutting behavior, during their rutting time, than they are when they're not rutting. And this can affect your hunt, right? You want to know, obviously, where the vitals are located on an animal so that when you take a shot, you know you're taking an ethical shot and that animal's going to die as quickly as possible. Basically, anything you can find out about your game animal, your quarry, what you're chasing, is really going to give you an edge on your hunt. So you want to do as much as you can to find out about whatever species you're chasing as possible, okay? So that's number 1, know your animal. Number 2, know your unit and or area, right? You want to get very familiar with where you're hunting. You don't want to just show up to your hunt the day of your hunt and just poke and hope, as they say. You're kind of just walking around hoping to stumble on animals. That might work if the population number in your unit is through the roof. Just anybody can find animals, right? But that's not going to work for units that are more standard hunts, more less densely populated areas of animals. So what you want to do is you want to try and learn that area as much as possible before your hunt. When you're planning a hunt, you want to think about, what are the things that I can control? And going to an area prior to your hunt, walking around, that's something you can control. You actually have the ability to make a choice and say, hey, I'm going to show up to my unit early, I'm going to do some preseason scouting, and I'm going to go and do that. What are some things you don't have control of? Well, like weather. You have no control over the weather during your hunt. If it's going to snow, it's going to snow. If it's going to rain or be windy or really hot, it is what it is, right? You get the card that you're dealt, and you got to work with that. So what you want to do is try to take advantage of all the things that you can control prior to your hunt so that you're as prepared as possible on your end for everything that you can prepare for. And knowing your unit is one of those things. You want to think about what areas you actually have access to. So you want to look at some land status maps, or you can download an app available that shows this is public land, this is private, this is state land, this is BLM, this is national forest, this is military, this is tribal. You want to know where all those areas are, because you're going to get into big trouble if you accidentally shoot your animal on private property or tribal property or military. You need to know where you're at all times on your hunt. And personally, what I do is I carry a GPS. Like I said, you can download an app nowadays. It's going to cost you, right? Cost you some money. But it shows me exactly where I'm at all times. I know as long as my land status chip is up to date, I know where I'm at, and I know what land we're hunting, and that keeps me out of trouble. You want to think about the terrain. What's the terrain like going to be in the area you're hunting? This is going to help you prepare physically. And that's a huge key. You need to be prepared physically for the kind of hunt you're going to embark on. So if your unit is extremely steep, high mountain country, and you live at sea level and there's no mountains around, that's going to be a drastic difference for you, right? You live at 100 feet above sea level, and your elk hunt is going to be at 8,000, 9,000 feet. That could affect you, and you need to think about those things. If you can't physically scout your area before you hunt, then you can do some e-scouting. Get on Google Maps, get on anything you can, USGS, look at the terrain, get some topo maps, look at where your unit is and what kind of areas you're going to be walking around, what kind of areas you're going to be camping, just so you get an idea of the terrain of your area. You want to think about where are you camping. The last thing I want to mention and know your unit is what's the nearest town closest to your camp. You may run out of supplies, you may need ice, whatever it might be. You want to know where that nearest town is so you can go easily from your camp and get what you need and come right back. Okay, my third tip for you that is extremely important is a must-know tip is you must know your weapon. You must be familiar with your weapon and practice, 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 right? Again, what can we control? Knowing your weapon, training, having the proper preparation for your hunt with regards to your weapon, you have control over that, right? You have control over how much you shoot, how much you practice, how much you train before your hunt. So this is so crucial. I can't tell you how many times, how many hunts I've been on where their game was right in front of them, 200, 300, 400 yards, 500 yards, and they couldn't harvest the animal because they didn't prepare with their weapon. They miss a shot that with proper preparation and training, you shouldn't miss, right? And we're all gonna miss. We're all gonna miss. So let me say that. I've missed on my hunts. But I've actually, when the opportunities have come, I've actually been more successful than I have missed. And I chalk that up to training. You want to be as prepared as possible, right? So practice. You want to think about what distance you're proficient at, to what distance. Knowing this is going to help you determine if and when to take a shot on your hunt. Know your current limitations. Just because you have a rifle that can shoot to 1,000 yards, that doesn't mean that you can. So what are your limitations? Are you good up to 300, 400, 500? Know that before going into a hunt so that when an animal comes out at 700 yards, you know, well, I can't take that shot. I've never trained at that distance. I got to get closer. I got to get to 3. I got to get to 2. Another thing to think about and know your weapon is with your game species, what caliber is going to work best for you? Are you hunting antelope, pronghorn antelope in Wyoming? Well, you don't need a 300 Weatherby Magnum to take down an antelope. Really, it's all about shot placement, right? So think about your caliber and pick the one that's going to be best suited for the species that you're pursuing. My last piece of advice in know your weapon is to use the same caliber and grain during training that you're going to be hunting with, right? Because changing that from your practice to your hunt, your bullet might shoot different. It might be hitting a little differently, and you need to know that. So I would encourage you to really know and use that one caliber, that one grain for that species that you're going to be hunting. All right, so those are my top three tips. Know your animal, know your unit, know your weapon. Let's talk about some bonus tips. Hunter safety courses are, I think, really important. And I think in most states, it's actually required to pass a hunter safety course before you can actually go on a hunt. Bonus tip number 2 is eat well on your hunt. In my opinion, if you can eat well and you can sleep well during your hunt, you're gonna go further, you're gonna feel more refreshed, and you're gonna be able to outlast the other people that are just gonna tire out, who aren't sleeping well and aren't eating well. So don't skimp on your meals. For dinner, for breakfast, most of the time, you're gonna be out in the field before dark, so depending on your species. So pack good. Pack a good breakfast that you can have out in the field. But usually for dinner, you're back at camp. Make you a good hearty dinner. Get you a good solid dinner so that you're fueled up. Get to bed at a good time so that you're ready for the next day. Eating well and sleeping well, I can't overemphasize those. It's so important. Stay warm and dry. If you're going on a January hunt in the United States and it's dead of winter and it's snowing and you're not prepared, you don't have the proper gear to be out in the cold like that, you're not going to be very comfortable and you're probably going to give up on your hunt a couple days in. A first aid kit is an absolute must. Hopefully you don't have a horror story or a bad story where first aid kits actually come into play. But I've had a couple of scares. One, and I do want to share this story with you so you know where I'm coming from. My brother and I were on an elk hunt in southern New Mexico, and we had completed the evening hunt. We're on our way back to camp. We were about 5 miles from camp. We had hiked a lot that day. On the way back to camp, we magically, luckily, whatever you want to call it, stumbled onto someone's bull elk that they had killed, and we didn't know at that time, but he had lost it. He had started field dressing it and realized he wanted some help. He was an older gentleman. I think at that time he was like 73 years old. He had shot this bull on his own, but he was seeing that he was having a hard time getting it apart, and he couldn't get it back to camp on his own. So he went back to camp to try to get some help from a buddy. Well, when he went back up to find the bull, he couldn't find it. Me and my brother just by happenstance found this elk at dark in the middle of a giant forest. What are the odds? And so we were walking down the mountain. We found them. We just ran into them, and we told them, hey, did you guys happen to shoot a bull? Yes, we did. Hey, we waypointed it. We can go back and help you get it out. So we volunteered ourselves at the end of a really tough day. We get back up. We're cutting this bull apart, and we're quartering it out and stuff. And the buddy of the guy that had shot the elk, he was trying to get out the buglers of an elk, the two ivory pieces that look like teeth. He was trying to get him out. While he slipped and he cut his wrist. And it was like the scene out of like Black Hawk Down, where the artery like tears and all of a sudden blood was just squirting up. You just saw blood coming out of this guy's wrist. Nasty. Like, it was like, that's not a small cut, dude. All of a sudden, we went from having a good time cutting up an elk. It was, probably 11:30 p.m. at that point, to, oh my God, we're 3 hours from a hospital. My first aid kit is not in my bag, because when we went to their camp, I thought, oh, we're packing out an animal. I'm going to leave everything I don't need, and I'm going to go get the meat with this guy. So I need all the room I can have. I left my first aid kit at their camp. We had nothing to help this guy with. The only thing we had were some game bags. I cut up the game bag, hoping it was somewhat clean, and I wrapped the crap out of this dude's wrist a lot, just to try to stop the bleeding. And all of a sudden, it was a race to get back to their camp and probably send this dude to the hospital. It was really bad. So hopefully the guy ended up being okay. He elected not to go to the hospital that night. I probably would have. It was a nasty deep cut. I mean, you could see inside the guy's wrist. And the next morning he woke up and the bleeding had stopped. So thank God for that. But it just goes to show the first aid kit, it can be, everything's fine, and then the next second, it's not, and it can get pretty serious. So you want to have at least a basic first aid kit with gauze, Band-Aids, wraps, anything you can, because situations might come up, okay? So keep that in mind. Get your meat cool quickly. I've had several hunters tell me, oh, deer are gross, antelope are disgusting, elk tastes gross. More often than not, what happened is in the field, they didn't cool their meat down quickly enough, and the meat kind of semi-spoiled, and it tasted gross. If you cool your meat quickly, I'm telling you, especially like young big game species, it is incredibly delicious meat. It is so good. So if you take care of your meat in the field, you're gonna have great meals at home. Your big game species shouldn't taste bad. They taste tremendous, and it's the best meat for you. There's no preservatives, and there's none of that junk that they put in beef and everything else we eat. So I really hope these things help you. Please subscribe to my channel. If they did, we got a lot more content like this coming out. And of course, we're always telling really cool outdoor adventure stories. Make sure to check that out. If you have time today, check out some of our outdoor adventure stories. I think you'll really enjoy them. If you fish or you hunt, you'll really enjoy them. But thanks for watching today. Thanks for subscribing. Please share our content, and I'll catch you next time. All right, take care.